You guys, if you have been listening to the show, you know I'm all over the map right now, even more so than usual. So I've reached out to people that I truly enjoy talking to. Not only do I look up to this person, I mean, I really truly credit this person as giving me inspiration for doing what I do. I think she is a legend in this business, period. What I do admire even more about her is not only I love her Bravo takes, of course. But what I think has been so amazing watching her over the past couple of years tune us in or turn us on into things that we should be watching that we might not know about. She has a newsletter that comes out, I believe, every Sunday that I look forward to every week. And if you have not signed up, sign up because it gives you a list of 5 or 6 things. And I consider myself up on pop culture and things to watch, but there's always one thing that I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, sometimes, damn it, I can't watch all of this, but there's so much good stuff. And she makes it sound so interesting and fascinating. She talks to everybody out there. She's talked to all the Bravo celebrities, of course, but she now is talking to producers, directors, the people that get inside these stories. I can't wait to see where she goes in the future because it is a constant inspiration. And I will say it's inspiration. It's not something like it never feels like competition because I could never compete with her ever, but it is inspiration in, wow, look at what you can create. We always said in acting class, create your own content. And this person has been a maverick in creating her own content. When the industry goes right, she'll find a way to go left. I mean, I truly think if you do not add this to your roster, what a big mistake because you are missing out on the knowledge of so much great television and stories that are happening right now. So, of course, you know her from the podcast Reality Life with Kate Casey. Here she is, the one and only Kate Casey.
Ryan, that was so nice. If I die tomorrow, will someone just like play that?
If you die tomorrow, they're going to think I killed you, Kate. Like they're going to literally play this audio on some weird Dateline episode or some show you would cover on HBO Max. And they're going to be like, Ryan Bailey talked to her the day before and predicted her demise.
Have you ever daydreamed like I have that you will at one point appear in an episode of Dateline? Not as like an expert, but like I know somebody that maybe like I want to be in an episode where it's like, oh, I went to school with that guy, and let me tell you something.
My worst nightmare is finding out what people actually think about me on a Dateline episode. If they're like, he was obviously creepy. We all knew. We always talked about it behind his back.
No one would ever say that. No one would ever say that. I bet there are a bunch of girls, if you were like on an episode, a bunch of girls from like acting class would be like, I totally had a crush on that guy.
I sweated so much through acting class that I really find that hard to believe. And Kate, I was in acting class with Armie Hammer, Joe Manganiello. I was in acting class with all those dudes, but also like Whitney Cummings. I had like a big baller class, and I was the least successful person in my successful class. And that was always so brutal to show up and everybody would talking about what they're working on, and I'd be like, I worked here during the day today.
Well, because you had to do a real job. I had that experience when I took classes at the Groundlings.
Oh my God, you took Groundlings? I did because
I had a day job, and then I would drive all the way from Orange County to take my classes. And they would all be talking about workshopping and the things that they were doing. And I'm like, oh, I was talking to my client like half hour ago. There was a girl in my class who made it to that Charlie Sheen show. I'm forgetting it now.
Anger Management?
The one before that. 2.5 Men. No.
The one that he was like on, his big one.
With John Cryer. That one. 2.5
Men.
Okay, 2.5 Men. So she was on the show, and I could never get past that. I was like, she is so boring. She has no personality. But then I think that she had like the perfect TV sitcom body. Like she was like olive oil, like just a string bean. And knowing how much weight television puts on you, I thought maybe she just is like he must have been like, that's the girl I want because she has the right look. But she didn't. She certainly wasn't funny. Oh, and then I had the hottest teacher. Oh my God, I had such a crush on him. Should I announce his name? Who cares?
Yes,
Why not?
I probably know who he is.
Hugh Davidson.
Yes, I know Hugh. Hugh, actually, I watched him when he was in Sunday Company because my friend Nick Wagner was in Sunday Company with him, and that's before you get pushed up to the actual
Yes.
groundlings. And I remember seeing him. I would come to every Sunday show that Nick was in, and I would see this guy, and he just looked just like a very handsome guy. Like I even
No,
knew, I was like, this is
oh
a
my God, he was
handsome
so
guy.
handsome. But I felt like I was the only one who was in love with him. Okay. So he was my teacher, and I just had the biggest crush on him. And I did something that's so embarrassing. Across the street from the groundlings, there was an Italian restaurant, and I went with my friend Nikki, who I worked with, and we're sitting there at the dinner table, and she's like, "Well, how are the classes going?" I go, "I gotta be honest with you. This guy, I have the biggest crush on. He's my teacher. He's so hot. He's so funny." I'm like going on and on and on. Okay.
He's right there.
There's a knock on the window. I look over.
Oh.
There's Hugh Davidson, and his friends are sitting at the next table. And when I say next table, it's like basically we're conjoined, you know?
Yeah.
They must have heard me say all of that and probably told him. One other weird thing is, I don't know if it's weird, but I just enjoyed it, is that I guess he has a reputation of being a curmudgeon, but I took all these classes with him, and at the end of the session, he sent me this long email with suggestions of things that I should do. And I told that to somebody else from Groundlings later, and they were like, he never does that for anybody. So he was probably just doing something nice, but I held on to that. Like I held on to like a dream, like maybe
yes.
in like a parallel life, we could have dated. The other person that I had a parallel life experience with was John Krasinski. I went to that cafe on 3rd. What was that called? Where everybody went? Toast. Okay. I went to Toast with my friend Kathleen. Kathleen was in town, and we went with her sister to lunch, and John Krasinski was like a table over, and I felt like we were looking at each other. This was before he obviously met Emily Blunt and fell deeply in love and is the happiest person in the world. But in my parallel vortex dream, I pictured myself talking to him outside of Toast, and then we ended up together. Do you have anybody like that where it was like this parallel vortex world where you envisioned yourself with somebody?
I mean, isn't that, I feel like, I mean, just to be honest, over the years, and I think this is the danger of social media, is that you will imagine I've imagined my life with thousands of people, like when you're like, I wonder what that would be like you have these imagination things. It's like, the fantasy about winning the Powerball. You're like, where would this go? And I think the thing is, sometimes I am so, sometimes I am not the most confident person. So even in the fantasies, I'll blow it somehow. I'll be like, yeah, but then she'll find out. She'll find out that it's like not an act, and then they're going to be annoyed. Like I'll have those kind of where it's like tempered by reality. John Krasinski, by the way, I remember he first moved to LA. He lived in an apartment by Toy on Tie on Sunset. And my friend Patrick was engaged to this girl, Jordy. And I remember he moved in and he was all flirty with Jordy. And we were all like, who's this guy? And he had just gotten the office. And we remember just thinking he was so cocky. And we didn't really, he didn't talk to us really. But, well, listen, we were guys like upset that he was like talking to somebody else's girl. So, yeah. And she thought he was the cat's pajamas. And obviously, he's turned out like, he's had a decent career, but we just remember being really, and then you're like, that's a fucking dude from The Office. Like and we just saw his career explode, but he was I remember being upset that he was very charming. That upset us.
Well, he's really, really smart. That girls just love a guy that talks about English literature, or at least I do. I don't know. Or
Bravo. Bravo's the other big thing. They love a guy that talks Bravo. I'm joking.
I think they do. Do you find that women go bananas once you can discuss the shows that they love? I bet they do.
I think for like half a second, and then it's kind of like, oh yeah. I think there is that sounds good in theory, and then you get into it, and then you see how much I actually do watch these shows and pay attention to them, and then it gets eerie. I think it switches over from like I read a lot of books and stuff like that, but I would much rather be considered book smart than Bravo smart, even though I'm proud of loving Bravo. Wait, moving on though, you were talking about.
I'm not going to let you get past this for just one second. What makes you very interesting in the same way, my friend? Do you know my friend Hillary Shepard? She's been like in every made for TV movie.
It sounds
She's always
familiar.
in like she was a Power Ranger. She's been in like everything, but she's okay. So she always, when she talks about reality shows, it's the same that you do. You guys have an interesting lens because you spend so much time watching people's picadillos and studying their personalities as an actor that I find your observations are so interesting. Like I am looking at them through the lens of like, I think of myself as a cultural anthropologist, but actors have to spend so much time studying someone's personality and their mannerisms that your perspective is so interesting, I think.
Well, no, I mean, I appreciate that. I will say, though, I was talking about this yesterday in regards to Nene Leakes. Now, I know you are colleagues and friends with Carlos King, who just did that 2-part interview with Nene. And I was going over all of the notes on the Nene Leakes interview. And I was making that point was that, you know, there is a certain star quality about certain housewives or people in general that even what I love about Nene is even if I don't agree with I would say like 40% of what she says, at least she has a strong take. You know, there's like when people have strong takes. Sure. Yeah. But a lot of people, how many housewives have we seen come and go that didn't land because they didn't have a take? They were happy to just be there in the background. And I think that's what it takes to really set you apart on these shows, even though it can cause long-term pain like we've seen with Nene. But also, sorry, just to get back, because I was thinking about this, where do you get your drive, Kate? Like, that's the thing I always wonder when I talk to you, because and also, in addition to what you said earlier about your Hugh writing you this letter and you held on to this. I mean, no. I'm saying,
I'm surprised. Don't be surprised if I'm buried with it. I'm not kidding you.
No, I mean, we all do this. I remember being on your show for the first time and I held on to that because I didn't have my own show at the time, nor was that even in my purview. Like I wasn't even thinking, but I remember holding on to that. Well, if I got asked on Kate Casey's show, well, at least that's something good. And you've always been encouraging to a lot of these podcasters out there. Will always, you know, you'll always get brought up about you being encouraging to other people. But what gives you your drive? Because you talk about, I mean, you make it look easy, but it's struggling every day. You know, you're having to push yourself up. And sometimes it's so hard to do that when so much other stuff is happening around you. Where do you get this drive?
I always feel like I'm at the bottom of the hill. I always do. And I don't know how it happened, but I have this thing where anytime I feel like I'm kicked down, I find the fire to get back up. It's almost like I use something that happens that's shitty as a reason to like propel myself even further forward. It's like this game I have to play with myself all the time. Like I get discouraged all the time, or like I get overlooked for things. And I try to turn that feeling of disappointment or feeling overlooked or, basically overlooked into an opportunity to challenge myself. So I kind of play that game in my head all the time. My inspiration, I'm just tireless about the pursuit of figuring out someone's personal story. I just feel like I have always been fixated on people's stories from the time I was really little. And I've said, I've done this Saturday series of my podcast where I tell more of my personal story.
That's what I was going to bring up. You've started to actually share your own personal story, which you had not been doing previously when you first started. And I think that's so fascinating.
Well, I felt like after 7 years, maybe I should tell people a little bit about myself and maybe they would understand more about like why or why I'm interested in certain interviews, the lens through which I look at life. And I've kind of realized in that process, from the time that I was little, I had like a totally dysfunctional family. And even as a little girl, I always used this weird coping mechanism, which I recommend to people. Whereas I stopped looking at the people around me in my family as my own, like as a shameful extension of myself, more as like television characters on a sitcom, because I watched a prodigious amount of TV. I loved watching television shows because it was a great escape. And I was like fascinated by different characters and their picadillos and the way they looked at life and their all of that stuff. So then I started looking at the people in my life, particularly like my stepfather, who was awful to me, as a TV character. Like if he were on a television show and he's this curmudgeon sitting in a Barco lounger and watching football games and screaming at people, people would think he was funny if he was a character on a show. So if I look at him like a television character, I can release some of the shame attached to me. So I kind of use that.
Wow.
And then I went to a boarding school for underprivileged kids, and I living in a student home with 16 girls who come from all walks of life. And I loved it because, number one, it was like a common ground. We had trauma bonding because we all came from like very difficult backgrounds. And I just love to hear their stories. I was like, so wait a minute, your mom is single and your dad's in jail.
So you were interviewing people at the boarding
totally.
school.
I was like, and your aunt's on crystal meth. Like what? And there was this one dad that would show up to pick up his daughters. He had daughters that were both in one of my student homes, and the Roselli sisters, and their dad would come to pick them up. And I was like, oh my God, I'm obsessed. He would show up in not decade approved clothing. Like he would look like he just left like a rave, or like he looked like he left like Studio 54. He would be in like bell bottoms, like he just did a couple lines, and he would show up to pick them up. And I just thought he was the weirdest, most interesting character. And one of the things that he did was he gave them a poster for Christmas of New Kids on the Block, and he forged all the names of the band members. And so they opened it and they were like, oh my God, our dad totally forged all the names. And I was like, that is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And so it's just like a bunch of people who also had like totally weird families. And I really do think that most things are funny. I find the funny in everything.
Yeah.
So when I was there, I was like, everybody has the most unbelievable story. And I kind of just adapted that throughout my life. I'm always just fixated. Like when I was in high school, I would go to like rent out videos and stuff, and I would want to watch documentaries. Like what, for example, there was one documentary I watched, I don't know, 4 times. I covered it on my show. It was the one about the plane that crashed in the Andes Mountains, and like a bunch of the members of the rugby team died. Yes. And they had to eat each other. Yeah. I watched that like 4 times in a row. And then I got the video after that, which was behind the scenes of making the actual documentary. I was not a normal person. Like normal girls my age were like, let's go to a party and dance. And I was like, no, I want to just find out why they had to eat each other after the plane crashed.
Oh my God. I mean, I remember when I was growing up watching that. It was Oscar nominated, but Hoop Dreams. Hoop Dreams.
Hoop Dreams classic. One of the best sports docs. Yes.
14 years old. And I went and I found that in a movie theater because I had read Roger Ebert's review. And I was the weird kid that was, I got this Roger Ebert book of like encyclopedia of movies. And I would try to watch everything in this book.
That's
and back then I worked at a Blockbuster, and I would get the Sunday paper and I would play this game. I would get the TV section and I would go to the back. And this is you had Real World about to start, and I would get in there and I would highlight everyone I've seen and everyone I haven't. And I would keep score every week, and it became OCD. Like, if I've seen 100 of these movies, it's going to be a good week. If I haven't, I need to make sure I get up to, and every week it would be this exciting thing. And I would check out movies from the library. And it is interesting. Documentaries have always been my thing. And that's why I love everything that you've been doing on the show about pointing people in other directions. Oh yeah. I mean, that was too. Well, Philip Seymour Hoffman, rest in peace, was on the Actors Studio a long time ago, that Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton. And he said, he's like, just go on a subway. He's like, look at the human behavior. And he's like, you are going to see more interesting things on that subway than any fictional movie could ever show you. And I always, that held true to me. But I do need, and I don't know, for me though, Kate, I need that lens of it still being on TV. Sometimes it's hard for me to do that in my own life, to find the fascination, and I hide myself away, but I can look it through a TV screen and I'm fascinated.
I feel like if you go to a dinner party with me, I'm at the end of the table and I've suction cupped myself to somebody, and whomever I'm with is like, oh, can we leave the party? I'm like, no, they just got to the best part of the story. My husband gets mad at me all the time because I get sucked into people's stories. I was on Balboa Island, and I went into this store, and my husband's like driving around the block to try to find a parking spot. And he's annoyed, and he keeps calling me to pick up. And I didn't pick up because I started talking to the sales clerk. And within 15 minutes, she's like, I've never told anyone this before. And then proceeds to tell me that her mother's boyfriend went to Mexico and shot her father. And I was, after my husband shows up, he's like, why aren't you picking up the phone? I'm like, how can I pick up a phone in the middle of that story? I'm sorry. Can you just hang on with that moment? I know you've just said you've never told anyone that story, but I just have to take this call. It's like when someone's talking to me, I shut out the entire rest of the world.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sucked into
I need
it.
this though, Kate. Like I need it to be on a pod. Like for some reason in real life, I'm not good at this. Like I even noticed that about myself. Is like I don't get into conversations with strangers. I don't. But on this,
can I ask you a personal
provides that
question?
bubble. Yeah.
Do you have ADHD?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a child with ADHD, and I feel like I'm a total expert on it now. Have you ever watched The Disruptors on Apple TV?
Mm-mm.
Oh my God, changing your life. You're going to watch it today because it's all about how the ADHD brain works. And it totally makes sense that you do, because when you're in your zone where you're fascinated with something, you completely deep dive it. But then sometimes in social situations, it's hard for you because the other person is working at a slower rate in their brain. You basically have a Ferrari brain that's working so fast that you want to jump to the next thing. And the person that you're talking to is oftentimes, most times, slower than you are. So it's hard for you to calibrate for that. And after years and years and years of that, you're like, I don't even, you know what? I would just like to avoid that situation. That's why.
That's fascinating. That's real. I mean,
do you know what they say in that
good.
documentary is the number one job for ADHD?
What?
Best jobs for ADHD, trauma surgeon, like a colonel of the Marines, because you live at this like elevated state. Look, I'll give you 2 examples of it. Interviewed this guy from The Challenge. His name's Jordan Wisely. Unbelievable. Do you know who that is? He's like a 2 fingers missing. And he wins all of the challenges. And I'm interviewing him. I go, I gotta ask you something. Do you have ADHD? He's like, oh my God, yeah. How'd you know? I'm like, it totally makes sense. And then he went on to say the reason that he wins all the challenges is because when they're sitting around the house and they're all chatting when they're not doing the physical challenges, he said they're all draining their batteries. He's moving around the house. He's fixing drains. He's like moving his body. So by the time they get to the physical part, they've drained themselves emotionally. And then in the physical part, because you have ADHD, you probably need physical exercise in some capacity every day. You guys can work longer and harder than other people. So now I have this theory that I think that most Olympic athletes are probably ADHD, because your brains are working at a higher rate and then your body needs to movement. Like when you were studying in school, I bet you were far more successful if you could take a test for 10 minutes, get up, walk around, and then go back to the test.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, by the way, this is what I'm saying. This is where I can actually pay attention. But
if it's not of interest to you, that's your problem, is that if it's not interest, you're gone.
Well, okay, so you love pop culture like I do, and reality television and all of these things, and you were just mentioning about deep diving things, and I was talking to, I think...
you're a deep diver of epic proportion.
Yeah, but I'm saying we used to, I mean, I don't want to romanticize it, but there used to be some victory in being able to deep dive when we didn't have everything at our fingertips. And now we can just go on the World Wide Web, like we have all of this information. Have you noticed that shift over the years in covering everything? And by the way, I was saying the other day, I was like, well, now everybody, I always call myself a pop culture commentator, but now I see everybody calls themselves a pop culture commentator. Everybody is doing this, not podcasting in general, but everybody has a very strong take. Like, I'm always curious where we're going with this. Where do you see, because you've been doing this, 7 years plus, loving this your entire life. Where is this headed? Where are we headed with not only podcasting, but pop culture?
I do think that everybody has their hot take on pop culture, but the difference is that the good deep divers are relentless in their pursuit to the end of the story. So like you might see somebody on TikTok or Instagram and they're like, okay, so Ariana Grande is getting a divorce. And this is the guy that she's now dating, but they kind of stop the story. But a good deep diver will go, by the way, has anybody noticed that her new boyfriend looks exactly like her brother? Okay, that's some Freudian shit right there. Yeah. So it's the people that go, that you got to go all the way to the end of the story. And most people don't do that. So I still think there's a space for the deep divers of the world who love pop culture. I think that all things are circular. And I think it ebbs and flows. That's what I should really say. And I think that there are a lot of people invested in pop culture, but I think that they'll move on to something else soon. I don't think those things stay.
How have you seen podcasting change since you started?
There's oversaturation of the market. I think that the networks are all with this belief that if they get somebody who's like an actor with like 2.3 million Instagram followers, that if they give them a podcast, that it's certain to be a big time hit. But what they don't get is like certain people, and this has been true for many years, like certain people work in certain platforms. Like a YouTube star is not always great on Instagram or Twitter.
Yeah.
And conversely, somebody who's on Twitter is not always great on TikTok. So when it comes to podcasts, like just because somebody is an actor on a scripted series, it doesn't necessarily mean that they could create content that can entertain people, you know, in a series of 12 episodes for an hour. So I think that people like during COVID, a lot of people started podcasts, and then people got excited about like a couple different celebrity driven podcasts that were successful. And now the industry thinks like all the podcasts should be done by celebrities. But I think some of the best podcasts that have been created are by individuals, people who don't have big platforms, who are so smart, so interesting, great deep divers, great at going down the rabbit hole, and have like a really interesting lens in life. And I'm hoping that it's going to shift back to what podcasting really began with, which was somebody who has a very unique idea and position and personality, and they're able to grow it.
I mean, speaking to your point, and I think you watched this as well. I was watching last night. Netflix has this great series called Untold about sports stories. Good. And I was watching the one on Jake Paul, who is now a professional, well, like getting to be a professional boxer, but he obviously started on YouTube. And the first 20 minutes is talking about his ascent and his drive with his brother Logan. And I've never been the biggest Jake Paul fan from what I've seen, but it was very interesting. And that's why I love documentaries as well, was that it was interesting to watch like, oh, this is how he started. This is where, and they were telling a good job at that story. But also that's interesting too, of like, yeah, not everybody's good at everything. And it's interesting then when somebody, is hugely successful on YouTube and then tries to become a boxer and actually is becoming successful in marketing.
And people thought it was a joke. They're like, this guy's not going to be a boxer. And it turns out he's like unbelievable. Wait, 2 things I have to tell you because I think you're going to be into it. I know I'm jumping around, but I just know you're going to.
No, this is great. And by the way, you guys, this is what we do. And I hope you're enjoying this because this is the conversation I need today. So.
Okay, number 1, I just interviewed this guy who hosts the show Survive the Raft. It's on Discovery. It's basically a bunch of people they put on a raft for 21 days that leaves Panama, and they have to they're trying to win money, but it's this it's like a social experiment because they're filming them on this raft, and it was a 50-year-old experiment done in 1973 that they are redoing. Anyway, the point of the story is the host is really the story to me. Okay, so this guy graduates from high school, tries to become an actor. Then it doesn't work out for him. So he goes to Darfur and works in a refugee camp working with kids. From there, he enlists in the military, becomes a Green Beret, does 2 tours, Afghanistan and Iraq over 6 years, leaves the military, goes to University of Texas and decides, I want to play football, but has never played 1 game of organized football, becomes a standout player, then gets recruited for the Seattle Seahawks and is now like a TV producer.
Wait, Kate, so you're saying if we want to make it as TV hosts, eventually we got to go to Darfur, then we got to go to
Green Beret.
What a story. And
yes. And ESPN made a documentary about him called The Long Shot.
Oh, what he was also about sports. I hate sports, love sports documentaries.
He was also the guy that told Colin Kaepernick, you should really kneel. I'm not kidding you.
He's
okay,
like
so you gotta
he's like the Forrest Gump. He's like the Forrest Gump of everything. Yeah. Like he just wow.
Okay,
that's
so
insane.
His name's Nate Boyer. Got to look him up. The other thing that I think you're gonna love. Speaking of the Paul brothers, it's reminding me of this, like weird relationships with siblings, like the Richard sisters, which like we love, like, deep diving, complicated sibling relationships. I have a book for you.
What book?
It's my current obsession. I'm almost done with it. I'm dying.
What is it?
It's called Jackie. It's by J. Randy Taraborelli.
Oh, he did the Michael Jackson. He did Elizabeth Taylor.
Yes. You know it. Okay.
Yeah.
His new book about Jackie Kennedy is holy shit. I used to tell people if you're going to go to the beach, get Tina Brown's book. Right here. Tina Brown's book, Diana, used to be my go-to beach book for people. This one is the new one. Okay, and here's why. You think you knew everything about Jackie? No way. I mean, I have a son named after Jack Kennedy and a daughter named Caroline. You would think I know everything. No, this book, he took him 3 years. He got access to letters that she wrote to other people. Their boyfriend's name that nobody knew anything about, but the relationship she had with her sister Lee is like Richard's level craziness. Okay, I'll just give you like a little spoiler.
Yeah.
Lee, her sister, met JFK first, and their diabolical mother, Janet, who's basically Kathy Richards, goes, he should really be with Jackie. That's messed up. Lee was sleeping with Onassis for a little while. And then like that breaks up, and then her sister marries him later. And Lee doesn't go to the wedding. She's like, why the fuck am I going to go to a wedding when I used to sleep with him?
We've always had stars of reality television. It's just that we didn't have reality television during this time. Well, speaking of, now that just gets me so excited because I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks on like drives to Arizona.
Oh, you got to do it. You got to do it.
I listened to Paris Hilton's autobiography, which I'm sure, who knows what she wrote, but it is interesting. She was talking about Bethany Frankel being her nanny because, of course,
right.
Kyle and Kim, and she was talking about Big Kath, which was, her grandma, and, her grandma, she was shipped over to Big Kath, Kyle and Kim and Kathy's mom when she was going rebellious. And, imagine being under the tutelage of Big Kath. If you know any stories about the Richard sisters, you know how instrumental Big Kath, their mom, was. What a training ground. Yeah.
I got something for you. My friend Carlene, she's from Palm Springs. The year that Paris moved to Palm Springs to live with a grandmother, Carlene was friends with her. And Carlene's mom used to drive Paris to school all the time.
I got to tell you, man, that memoir of Paris Hilton actually changed a little bit. That and the YouTube documentary on Paris Hilton that came over the pandemic changed how I view Paris Hilton to be like.
But I feel like she's just scratched the surface. I feel like the book that she writes in 15 years will be better. Like, I feel like.
Don't you feel like that with
so
every one of these? Well, but
yes, that's
but
true.
Even like if you think about the Bravo celebrities that like put out their book, like I was thinking about Lala's book the other day, Give Them Lala, and I was
that book's totally irrelevant now.
I said, well, that's what I said at the time. I said, this book is great. It's fine if you're like Bravo and like her, but and this was when she was still with Randall. I was like, I can't wait for the book 20 years from now when she's done with Randall, when she's done, because that's going to be the real story. This is just a warm up. Like Paris Hilton had already lived an insanely full life. So I was kind of like shocked because most of us don't live that kind of high profile life that she off to the wilderness camp. But anyway, I got a book for you. Have you read or listened to Oscar Wars by Michael Schulman?
No, but that sounds right up my alley.
Oh my God. It is so.
Is this better to read? Like, do I need the hardback or is audiobook better?
Listen to the audiobook. And also if you don't like, and sometimes I want to warn people because it starts with the beginning of Hollywood. And I find that fascinating, but a lot of people don't. But you can skip ahead to like the 60s or the 70s when like Midnight Cowboy came out, Easy Rider. But then it just gets it gets into all the Weinstein stuff with the Oscars and the competition between Steven Spielberg with Shakespeare in Love and Saving Private Ryan, and how like all like the tricks that Weinstein used to do behind the scenes. It went into like exhaustive coverage of the Moonlight La La Land debacle with the envelopes, and it goes step by step on how that envelope got switched out to the wrong envelope that Warren Beatty read. But for me, a movie kid, you guys might not even know what I'm talking about, but I wanted to bathe in that audio.
I totally understand how that feeling. Yeah. I went to a lunch 3 weeks ago and there were two women from Saturday Night Live there, one of the original members. And it took
Lorraine
everything
Newman?
in me. Yeah, Lorraine Newman. And Julia Sweeney. And it took everything in me not to weep.
Oh.
At the end, I go, I just need to tell you before I go that what did I say? I said something like, if I could tell my younger self that I would be sitting here looking at the two of you legends, I cannot wait to go home and tell my daughters that I got to meet both of you. And then I started crying and then they started crying. I think it's important to tell people. Don't you think when you meet somebody who made a difference, you got to tell people?
1,000%. And 1,000%. It was so interesting though with Saturday Night Live. I've watched every episode of that show up until last season. And it was so heartbreaking for me because I watched it. My dad made me watch it with him, and I mean,
Oh,
I
that's
grew
so
up loving
cool.
it so much, and it was that frustrating thing where I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this because I would, okay, just watch Weekend Update or just watch this. But the internet now moves so fast that most of the jokes that you see on Saturday Night Live are already used by the time it gets to Saturday. But what I kept thinking was,
Yeah.
it reminded me of, I don't know if you went through this, like I watched every season of The Real World. And
Oh,
then there
every
was
season.
once, but then there was that, I got to the point where I was like, wait, why this isn't even the same. I don't even, and
Because it
it was
changed. Yeah.
but it was also, we're getting older too. And I just
Hmm.
sat out there going, man, I hope kids out there love SNL and think it's the funniest thing that since sliced bread, but it's just, I'm having to take a step back. And there was something that was very sentimental, and it made me sad because I'm like, I'm just now wasting an hour and a half where I don't necessarily love any of this except for like a key moment, which I could usually see on the internet anyways.
That's sad and true.
Okay, so moving again, this is a little warm up, you guys. Okay, so I don't think you probably haven't seen Watch What Happens Live from last night, but I was watching it this morning
I
really
saw the clip
quickly.
of the
Okay, so
Ozempic one.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a woman. I don't think you are at this place, nor do I need you to reveal this. But Erica Jane said that she has lost, what, a great deal of weight. She looks, very fit and good, or whatever the word you want to call it is. And she said it's not Ozempic. She said it's going through menopause. And then I led me down a rabbit hole
Well,
of
that's just
reading about
stupid. That doesn't. Yeah,
That's
life doesn't work out that way. I think
okay.
here, I'm as a former crisis communications expert, I would say to all of these women, just because someone asks you a question doesn't mean you need to answer it. I mean, ultimately, someone's weight, whether or not they get their period, whether or not they're going to have another baby, all of those things are a deeply personal question. And if you don't want to answer it, then just say a lady doesn't tell her secrets or something. You don't need to answer it, and you don't need to make up a dumb lie, because when you make up a
dumb
dumb
lie that's
lie,
deeply personal that actually involves your body, like menopause, I would imagine is a very personal thing as well, and so it's an untouchable thing where you can't really ask follow-up questions to somebody that's saying, well, I went through
no, you
menopause.
can't. But then in the aftermath, she has all these people going, okay, you got to be kidding me. Like, that doesn't make sense at all. She could have avoided this whole thing by just saying, a lady doesn't tell her beauty secrets.
Yeah,
Just because
exactly.
this is a life thing. I tell my kids this, I'll tell you, I'll tell clients, whatever. Just because someone asks you a question doesn't mean you need to answer it. And conversely, answer the question that you want to answer. If someone asks you, did you murder your brother? Doesn't mean you have to answer it. You answer the question that you want to answer. So you go, I've always loved my brother. You
Yeah.
are in control of your own life.
Yeah, I mean, well, it just is so interesting though to look at Erica Jane. She just went to that luncheon with the victims of Tom Girardi, and it seemed like that was a
That was
positive
bizarre.
experience. I mean,
That's
bizarre, but
bizarre.
oh, of course. And Kate, did you ever find this out? Because it was right around the time that they said they picked back up cameras for Kyle and Mauricio, and I was like, oh, please don't say this is going to be filmed for the picking back up cameras, and that's why this is happening. Do you know if this was for the picking back up cameras?
I think what happened is similar to Vanderpump Rules, where something gigantic happens and they have no choice but to follow that story. If they hadn't followed Mauricio and Kyle, it wouldn't have made sense. They have to, because that's apparently part of the season, is that they're having these marriage problems. So if you have something big like that happen, you have a responsibility. So what happens a lot is, I think a lot of the producers and the crew members are like, the 3-4 months our contract is completed, now I can move on to my next project or take the vacation I wanted. And then something happens, and unlike scripted TV, like, you have to keep following these people's stories, and then you find yourself, you're like working, and then they're probably pissed. They're like, I hope I'm getting paid for this. But you had to follow that.
No,
You're like,
completely.
wait,
But
Kyle has a girlfriend? I wonder though, I have no reason to believe this but my own intuition. Do you think it's possible that maybe Morgan is like a sober companion? And I say that because Kyle has talked about her sobriety a lot. In like the last year.
Her year anniversary. Yeah.
And I believe Morgan, I don't know much about her, but what I've heard is
sober
she's sober as well. So is it possible that people are jumping to a conclusion? I think that people that, from my understanding, if they're in a sober program, that's a deeply personal thing. and they don't always want to announce that. And so is that impolite of people?
It is,
I don't
but
know.
it's like your Erica Jane thing of like, a lady never tells her secrets, is that even if that is the case, it's not something. But I will, in where I don't think that is true, is that, you know, this Morgan Wade has a burgeoning career that I don't think she would be able to stop and be a sober companion and travel around. Like, there is something
but
more,
maybe
but I think
she has been sober for a long time. Like I think they say in your first year, they don't recommend you getting into a big relationship or having a new job or something like that. A big life change. Maybe she's been sober for a while, and maybe Kyle now wants to make a docuseries about her because she's been so instrumental in helping her with her sobriety. I'm just saying, what is that a possibility?
It is a possibility, but
I would feel like shit if people were like making all this commentary about a relationship that didn't actually exist.
But I also think that this could just be a special friendship that is not a sexual relationship. Like, I mean,
True. Absolutely.
I also,
100%.
if you are going through marital issues, I have gone through marital issues.
Mhm.
You do look for people that are not friends with your actual spouse.
True.
So it is like, of course, and we know Kyle always loves country music. You know, it obviously seems like a special friendship that Kyle needs. I don't really care, but it is interesting because the conversation of sexuality is now coming up more and more on Bravo. And I know you were just on vacation, so you haven't caught up fully with Roni. But in one of the recent episodes, Jenna Lyons, who I know a lot of you guys knew,
I've interviewed her before. I've interviewed her before.
For what?
She had a show on Max. It was about her new business that she was starting. So I interviewed her for it.
Was it a good show, or was it?
It was good. Like, it was interesting.
Yeah.
I think that she's like at first I was like, I don't know how that's going to work on Real Housewives. Also because like we had private conversations like before and after the interview where she was like asking me what she should watch. And I got the impression like she doesn't watch Real Housewives at all. So that was like, okay. Cause I just find her to be incredibly fascinating and quirky. Yeah. In a way that she's almost like the most interesting person in your art school, right? And so she's like fascinating, but I didn't know how it would mesh with all the other women. She almost like needs her own show.
Well,
does that make sense?
So that's exactly, and that's I mean, I don't want to say anti-housewife, but she is that housewife that is pushing against these. You know, she's very honest. She's like, listen, I've never really done girls' nights and sleepovers unless it was a romantic situation. She's honest about it, but it's also interesting being the one that all of these ladies already know. So they're already coming in with these assumptions or wanting to impress her, and she's just like, listen, I'm just me. I'm not. She doesn't come off bragging
by them. You don't roll with the crowd that she's been rolling with for all these years. Like she with Beyonce.
She dressed Michelle Obama. Like, I mean,
there's nothing they can do. The best thing that they can do is just be themselves. She seems like the kind of person who's like, I love the fact that you are weird in your own way.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And I love seeing that. I'm still totally digging her, but it's fun to watch the other ladies' reactions to her. You just don't want to get too in the weeds with that. But it is that thing with first seasons of Housewives shows where I'm leaning in, and I'm still at that place where I have, like, I was talking about Tamra from the OC the other day. And I was saying, you know, when I look at Tamra, I think about all the seasons past of Tamra. So all of my thoughts and feelings go into when I look at Tamra on screen. All these Roni ladies, I don't know them. So it's all new. Each week I'm like, okay, that's interesting.
I love it.
Yeah. I keep telling the audience, like, you lean in a little closer. I'm more willing to hear their stories. And when I get an answer of why the behavior is the way it is, I'm like, oh, sweet. That's why. Oh,
that's why. It's like a puzzle piece.
Yes, exactly. Yes. But with Tamra and the OC and a lot of these long
Housewives
shows.
Story. Yeah,
that's why it gets frustrating, because it gets almost like this is a show, and you're in the OC. You know all of these ladies. By the way, the OC seems so flippin' small because
it is small.
Do you know Jen Patantri?
I don't know her, but I remember Bronwyn telling me the season that she was hired. Oh, they're looking at me and this other woman. At that time, her Instagram handle was like Kodo Mama 5. I think. And she was like, yeah, she's like a yoga instructor. So I'd heard about her a long time before, but she lives in Kodo, which is it's not close to here. And plus our kids would never here's the thing about OC. I've said this before, and I'm sorry if people have already heard this, but to kind of explain it, And I really do believe that each franchise has to tell the story of the people that live there. That's like the sixth character, the seventh character. So what makes OC really weird is this. You basically stay in your own little neighborhood. Very few people go. It's similar to New York. Like if you're in New York, you kind of stay in the Lower East Side, right? Like you wouldn't hear people hanging out in Staten Island if they live in the Lower East Side. It's just weird because they just stay in their own pocket. So
which we saw in Real Housewives of New York. The ladies complained when they had to go to Leah McSweeney's side of town.
Absolutely. So it's the same in the OC. So like people who live in Laguna Beach would never hang out with somebody in Coto de Caza because that's 45 minutes on a highway. You stay in your own little neighborhood because your lives, like your friend group, your social group intersects usually with like your work, like whatever you do for work or your children, or in this case, which makes Orange County very interesting, is like the people you went to college with. And my experience here is that most of the people that at least live in the towns where I live, they all went to USC. So they went to the same high school together, and then they went to USC, and they were same sorority or fraternity, and they still hang out now. So as an outsider, it's near impossible to have entree into different social groups because they just like to have their own set of friends. And when they have their own set of friends, they do everything together. So it's not unusual to see a group of friends from this area go to Palm Springs, and they're all going to get matching trucker hats. They're all going to say the same thing. It's going to be like YOLO or a birthday age or whatever, or they go to Cabo. It's like a pack mentality here where I would say like in New York, you want to set the trend. In OC, there's a paranoia about not following the trend. So everybody has the same car. They go on the same vacations. They have the same conversations. If you go to a party, it's like, who's your interior decorator and where are you going on your next vacation? Versus the conversations in Beverly Hills are about like, industry stuff or like, have you been to Dubai? New York is like totally different conversation. That's what makes all the franchises very interesting. So Orange County never really makes sense to me because I never feel like it's really telling that story about how impossible it is to be an outsider and how people are so cliquey. So it would never make sense for Emily and Gina to be friends. They don't even live anywhere near each other. Tamara would never be friends with Gina or Emily. Heather Dubrow, guarantee you, would never be friends with any one of these women. She lives in her own little pocket. Her kids go to a specific school.
Her house has its own zip code. Her house is her house, the $55 million house that she just sold. Yeah. I mean, like,
okay. So when you would go into her neighborhood, that neighborhood in the house that she just had, you go into the gate, then you go up a hill. I think it was like 2 miles. It's like steep uphill. Then you get to a gate. And then you go through another gate just to get to her house.
She's salted the earth. She's salted the earth. She's
when Emily's like, or not Emily, when Gina's like, oh, I'm just here on PCH, just driving past with gifts for your kids in the car. It would make no sense.
Yeah, no.
People also are lazy drivers. So if you're in, it's kind of like LA too. So in LA, it's like somebody's in West Hollywood. If somebody's like, come to Santa Monica tonight, people are like, oh fuck no, that's like going to Utah. I'm not doing that. Like I don't know how long. It's the same thing in OC.
That's incredible. But you were talking earlier about, in reality though, Real Housewives of Orange County, the first season was kind of like that because it did show the clique and there was an outsider. Awesome. Remember, we had the outsider, Joe De La Rosa, but also
Kimberly. Kimberly was the outsider because she was trying desperately to ingratiate herself into that Coto de Caza tennis club. And she was basically not botching, I shouldn't say that, but like modifying her body to look like the quintessential Orange County housewife. Remember, she had the breast implants that were way too big for her tiny body, and she had the hair extensions. And when she left the show, she completely changed her look. She cut her hair. She dyed her hair darker. I think she took her implants out. So that is so true to the OC story. You have outsiders that come in. It's not easy for them to be accepted, and then they modify themselves because that's the OC way. The paranoia about being part of the trend and not setting the trend. So if you are an outsider, like who walks in and you look like a woman from New York, I give you 6 months. You get lip injections. You get you wear the short skirts and the platform heels.
I mean, Kate, have you ever tried to assimilate to the OC look? Have you ever been like,
Not a day in my
I
life.
gotta get a butt
No.
implant. I gotta get a like.
No,
I mean,
it's
that's
so much. In fact, people, if I go to a party, people are like, you're not here from here, are you? And I'm like, no, I look like, like a J. Crew girl from Philly.
shout out Jenna Lyons, J.
Okay,
Crew.
another thing that's weird about here is that, and I'm just so East Coast this way, is like people on the East Coast ask a lot of questions. So like I was on that podcast Queen of the Con that Eliza Rosen does, and they were asking me about this one woman named Lizzie
Love
who was
Eliza,
like a
yeah.
con artist. And I go, OC is perfect for a con, and here's why. Nobody asks questions. So when I ask questions, just as you would, people treat you like you're interrogating them. They're like, well, why are you asking that? So no one asks questions, so you could move here and make up a totally fake life. Which is interesting because the people that go on Real Housewives, they think that they can do that. And you're like, no, there's the internet. Like people will find out.
It's wild how many people want this celebrity, this specific celebrity of being on reality television without realizing a lot of people are going to jail lately. A lot of people dig. Like people don't realize, like we deep dive everything. And I feel like it's this momentary lapse of judgment of momentary Instagram fame and then completely having every bad mistake you've had in your life dug up, people zeroing in on what makes you potentially annoying immediately. I mean, I don't know if the cost risk benefit, like, I don't think it's there anymore. Like, I mean, who here is, I mean, we're not going to see somebody like Bethany Frankel for a very long time in terms of selling their liquor brand. I mean, maybe Kyle Cook on Summer House, maybe, but not to the level of that. So you're saying, I just want this momentary, very specific kind of fame that reality television brings. And I think sometimes people think that is so much more worth it than stable family, stable this, stable that.
Well, yeah, I just saw this Instagram meme. It said, being famous on Instagram is like having Monopoly money. And so I think that they sign up because they're like, well, if I become an Instagram star, social media star, then that means that I'm going to get all this monetization. And it's just not true.
No, it's not true at all. I mean, it's not true at all. I mean, in fact, it's like that. I mean, okay. Anyways, real quick, OC, before we skip to I want to ask some Vanderpump things real quick. Is that have you ever drank with Shannon Bedore?
Never. No, I've seen her at restaurants, but no.
Do you know that tiki bar that she supposedly got kicked out at?
Like a quarter mile from my house.
Yeah, I hear it's like kind of a ratty. I hear it's like a ratty.
It's ratty. It's in like a little strip area. I'll tell you what else is in it. It's like a boba place, a tutoring center, like a chicken spot, and a nail salon. It's, you know what? I'll take a picture of it. I'll take a picture of it today, and I'll send it to you. You can post it with the episode.
I'll post it. Yes, because my friend lives in the OC, and she was telling me, she goes, man, wait, she was at that tiki bar? Like that tiki, like what?
Like no one goes there. It's so weird.
And at the end of this past week's OC episode, which we're going to see a new one or tonight.
Wait, who's your friend? Do I know them?
No, her name's Millie, and her mom live there, and she is always out and about with her mom, and always bumps into Shannon Bedore. Like she bumps into all of these ladies.
Well, tell her to say hi to me if she sees me.
Oh my gosh, I will. She actually makes really cool vases and pottery.
She'll like see me at CVS or something. I don't know where she'd see me.
I'll actually tell her today, but she. I just get this impression of Shannon Bedore that like last week she like was like, you can't talk about John Jansen, and took her mic back off, which I think these things need to be stapled to the housewives. It really does. Like, I'm like, what is this secondary life that they have potentially?
Okay. So my experience with her, I first met her like years ago outside of Gulfstream, which people who listen to my show or live, I'm there all the time. That's my favorite place. I don't go anywhere else because I'm a loser. I'm like one of those people that like has a certain thing they like to eat and they eat it all the time. I'm just boring like that. So my experience with her is she was still married at the time. That was my first experience. And she was with the kids. And I went over and said hello. And I felt like her eyes were darting back and forth. And I wondered at the time, imagine yourself if you were like, studying actors and you met somebody and they're with their family and they just start like darting their eyes back and forth, your impression would be they're paranoid, right?
Yeah.
That's what I came across. I was like, I'm just like introducing myself and saying hello. And I wondered at the time, is she like this for all people that are in the media or media adjacent? But it seems like over time, it seems like I just think she's like that all the time. I think
Oh,
she's just
totally.
like
And but that's why I like her.
She's like a frenetic energy, I think.
I
But
like that
again,
though.
that's why she's great. And I remember I interviewed Doug Ross and Alex Baskin years and years ago, like beginning of my show. And they said that when they were interviewing her, she was just like a character. Like she was like very angry, I think they said in the meeting, because like she had ordered Christmas cards and there was some screw up and she was like complaining about it. It felt very authentic to them. I think, and I've talked to casting directors where they're like, someone's not right if they walk into the interview and they're like, you are not going to believe what's going on, because they're kind of like playing it up. But in Shannon's case, she really was like, she was frenetic, and then she was like, I'm just so fucking mad, and like kind of like riffed, where they were like, that's a window into, if we film her all the time, that's what we get.
Yeah. And also, so it gives this good foundation for you can go any which way with it if you have an actual real person. But what I also like about Shannon is that, as much as she tries to protect, like she obviously is a very sensitive woman, but the way she lets Tamara back in her life, even though like there's like, Tamara's like a machine to me. Tamara is like, her love is the show and her on the show. For her to say that she's best friends with any of these ladies, I think is so false. And the way these ladies buy it, it cracks me up, because like Tamara is Tamara. You see it. It's right there like you see Shannon. But Shannon, there's something so frenetic and sensitive that she buys.
What I liked about Shannon too, remember when she was cast, what made her interesting too, was like she lives in this house in Crystal Cove, which is, by the way, the same neighborhood where Heather just had the house with this like through the 3 gates. And she has this beautiful home in this very like surface level area, but she was like consumed by crystals in the corners and garlic. There is a segment of women, and especially where she lives, where they think they know more than doctors. Like there's like an alternate cure for everything. And I liked that they cast her for that reason, because there is a segment of the population that is like that. And how fascinating to be that wealthy and then to have like crystal, like,
we see all the Eastern medicine her doctor kept showing up,
all that
remember?
stuff, but also the way she would fixate on something like, I need 8 lemons in a bowl. I wish they still leaned into that part of her a little bit more, like I think it's hard though things that she does.
But see, when you have a show that's that many seasons, I think it's hard to actually get into the minutia of personalities like we can with Roni right now. And I think that's like sometimes the unfortunate thing when you get a show that keeps getting, it's like rolling down the hill and picking up steam. I mean, I will say this season, for some reason, they're really trying to push Gina with all these stories. And I feel like they're just throwing things up against the wall and seeing if something finally sticks for Gina. Yeah, and for me, I'm like, you slowing the story down.
I don't want anybody to lose their job. I want to be very clear about that. However,
no, I'm not saying let her go. I'm just saying it feels weird.
But I am saying she doesn't really work with the show.
But we've said that from the beginning, and it just
no one's listening to us, Ryan. I don't know why.
But like Emily Simpson, I feel like Emily Simpson has
but I don't think
I think she does. Like after this season, I'm like, oh, Emily has found her footing. It took 5 seasons, but it's finally fully there for me. I mean, I really enjoy her.
But it seems like her personality is like, I just want to prosecute somebody. I still don't understand her marriage with her husband. Like, are we just pretending like he's like an okay person now? And I really don't see a lot of her mothering. Like, I don't know any of her friends. I don't like.
Well, come on, we see her with Annabelle.
Was her surrogate. Her sister was her surrogate. I want to.
I forgot about that.
Bring that back. Like, bring her back. I want to see. I don't really know anything about Emily's life, and taking your daughter to a modeling class because you want to make your daughter a model is not really telling me the story of who you are.
Oh my God. I love that. Okay. I could talk OC all day, but are you good for a couple more minutes? Are you good? Or do you have to rush? Okay, cool. You did at the very end of the heat of Scandal, you got one of the best interviews with the executive producer of Vanderpump Rules, Alex Baskin from Evolution Media, which also does OC, Beverly Hills. What was your, I don't not need your overall take on Scandal, but what was your impression of him knowing Mr. Baskin through the years? Did you get a sense of where he was at? Was it excitement? Was it,
no, he was exhausted. God. Yeah, he was exhausted. And okay, so before the season started, we had lunch and I brought it up in the interview. I was like, remember when we had lunch? And you were like, yeah, I just feel like I'm going to have a lot of time and I'm going to be able to relax. And like, And then it was like a couple weeks later, they started shooting, and then this bomb drops, and his life is far crazier than you would imagine as an executive producer. So he's taking calls all the time, not just from the talent, but from the network, from his crew. He is so dialed into all these different characters that it's very hard for him to shut off work. Like, he really doesn't have a life. And so when something of this magnitude happens, it was like a 24-hour a day job, almost. Like, he didn't sleep a lot. There was always a new development. So once it kind of got to the end of the season of filming, then all the social media coverage and all the news stories, and he was getting texts nonstop from people from different corners of the world he hasn't even talked to in a long time, like, what's going on with Ariana and Tom. Every morning, if you open your phone and you're getting that, and then you've got all these emails and calls, like, it burns you out. So by the time I talked to him, he was like, I'm kind of over this story. Like, he was like, I'm sick of talking about it. I go, I'm kind of sick about this story right now. And he's like, I am too.
But then
imagine too much.
But imagine then also having to be that person of trying to talk Rachel into coming back, or try, like, because you have, as an executive producer, you can't be harsh. You can't be like, screw you for doing that with Tom. You have to be like,
no, and he's not like that.
Yeah, no. You're like, I want to know I want to know what the story is.
He's a very empathetic, kind person. He really cares about everybody that's on the show, and that includes the crew. Like, he really is like a very pro crew, really cares about them as well. And he would never push someone to do something that they weren't comfortable with. The story is important to him, but more than that, people are important to him. He's a really, really good, nice person. He's one of my favorite people who works in entertainment. So I think he'll tell the story in the right way, and with everyone's needs and hopes and dreams and all of that in mind.
I mean, we definitely are at Vanderpump exhaustion, even though you go online and it's still there. We're still showing every scene that they're filming for season 11. Like, it really is nonstop. And now this week we got the confirmation that the Jack show is happening on Peacock.
Yeah. Actually, the day I interviewed him for that the Vanderpump post show, he said, we just greenlit the show. I think that, unfortunately, this is the beast of the business, is that I just don't think people are going to care as much this season.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean,
that's frustrating as the filmmaker. Yeah, exactly.
It's a mixture of all these things that you could never predict.
Well, remember, he said in the interview, he's like, I think nonstop of like, okay, how do we come back? Like, how do we do another season? Remember, he said in the interview, he was like, when you guys don't like Housewives, seasons, we hear it, we know. He's like, we get it. But we can only do what we're given. We can only make with what we filmed and what we were given by the cast. So I think this might be a season where they're all, as a cast members, burned out from all of this, that they might not fully invest in, and then they have to make a show from that.
I mean, that's why I always think, and just back to our earlier conversation about documentaries, is that the thing that I will fantasize about is fantasizing about seeing those conversations. That's the documentary I want. But how do you put a season 11 together after this?
True.
Like, or even just like, even like you were saying, like Shannon, like when she met with the producers the first time, she was bitching about this. I want casting tape interviews. I want to see that as like Shannon Bedore's first casting tape. It's a 21-minute show. It's like when they did that special on Countess Luann's past back in the day, like before she was a housewife. Like, those are the things that I'm now more fascinated in sometimes than the actual shows, because I want to know how the sausage is made now.
What would be interesting if they did, and here's my suggestion, Bravo, I'm happy to be executive producer of this, have cast members play their audition tapes and have them put commentary in. And make sure you choose people that are a little bit introspective. So, for example, if it's Shannon, I want her to say, at that point, I was really kind of starting to think that something was wrong in my marriage, but I thought that this would be a great vehicle for us to get closer, which obviously I was like completely disillusioned with what would actually happen. Or, I remember that I was so pissed about those cards, and I was like how could you screw me over? I'm Shannon Bedore, or whatever it is, the commentary, but allowing them to look back at who they were before they became a housewife. That would be very interesting.
When you have now the history that Bravo does, I want them to like lean into back catalog things. They just announced Couch Talk yesterday with Captain Lee and Kate Chastain, where they're going to go over like the week of Bravo shows, which I'm like, I know they were doing Below Deck Talk or whatever, which, is great. I always wanted to do what happens in Bravo social media for the week, and then have it like a bunch of people like us, like Best Week Ever used to do, of like, okay,
oh my God, that was my dream to be on that show.
Right. I remember
dream.
being in high school watching that and just going,
man,
if I could make it. And then I found out later that it was like filmed in this dirty studio, and they would just show up, like these people would just like, oh yeah, we got paid $100, and I thought, wow, these guys are like God, the cream of their, Paul Scheer and all these guys.
Yeah.
But okay, so we're God, I could keep talking to you forever. I wanted to ask you this. Just this is so off topic with Bravo, but I don't even know why I want to. Like, I went and saw. Like, I'm here at my parents' place, and I started watching all the Mission Impossible Tom Cruise movies that are on Paramount Plus, just because I was like. And then the new Mission Impossible 7 came out like a couple weeks ago. And last night, like around, like I snuck off after work and being with my family at like 9:45 to see it by myself. And I don't know if I was blown away. And I was like, this Tom Cruise, man, like, what is your take on Tom Cruise? Which I know is, I'm not even sure even how interested in him are you, but I'm just like it's
when
wild.
I look at him recently, I'm grateful that he's allowed himself to age a little bit.
Yeah.
He looks like somebody, though, who has gone through an emotional tornado. Like, it makes me wonder what has happened behind the scenes at the Church of Scientology and his management offices after the fallout of the Katie Holmes divorce, and then all of the media coverage. Like, I want to be privy to the conversations. Like, you gotta dial it down. You gotta go and disappear for a while. This is our strategy when the movie comes out. I feel like he was surprised how well the Top Gun movie remake.
Yeah. And then he became king. He became king of Hollywood. Like, welcome back, Hollywood.
Genuinely was surprised, and is still, like, he strikes me when I see his body language. It looks like he's almost waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, they'll have him at like a studio, and all these people are clamoring to get his attention, and he's like grateful, but it's almost like there's something behind his eyes, like he's afraid someone's going to go up and go, what the fuck is going on with Scientology?
I will tell.
He's doesn't he seem like on edge?
Well, I think that's just how he's just intense. He's intense.
Leah Remini must like haunt his dreams. The intensity, I'm
curious. He's so cocky that I sometimes wonder if that actually is the case, or when you think you are so in the right, if you are so indoctrinated that you might believe Leah is wrong.
You got to listen to Rob Lowe's podcast, because he does this. He did this interview, one of his first episodes, where he talks about when they were on the set of The Outsiders. Yeah. And he's like, he was not like the rest of us. Like,
yeah.
Rob and Chad grew up in Malibu, and they were friends with the Sheen brothers and blah, blah, or the Estevez brothers. And they were like, he shows up and he was all business all the time. And it seems like everyone says that, like, all business, like, doesn't have a moment of like let's just hang around and kick it. So imagine that personality, and then the indoctrination, like, there's no hope for you.
Well, and also, it's like, I remember back in the day, if you're old enough to remember, like, the Tom Cruise gay rumors. And to me now, like, decade plus later of those rumors, I was like, oh, to me, it's not even that. It's just, he's asexual. He's attracted to making movies. This guy only wants to make movies.
Movies.
I was watching this Mission Impossible. I'm like, I don't even know how you begin to put a film like that. I mean, and those other ones were pretty intense, but this was like just nonstop, where I'm like, this guy is insane to even. I was blown away by it, but then I just kept thinking of like the man behind it, of like, what drives you.
But I think he has humanity to him, and he's funny and all of that. But I was listening to an interview that Ben Affleck did with the guys from SmartList, and they were talking about Matt Damon. And he said, even as a kid, Matt always talked about directors and producers all the time. And he would only pick projects according to who the director was. And Ben was like, we're literally like just trying to make 30 cents. Like, it's a made for TV movie. And he's like, well, no, I really, you got to go with the director. It's like, those people are so successful because they're so intense. They're impassionate and intense about something. I feel like the Richard Bransons, the Elon Musk, all those people are similar. By the way, all have ADHD. Brings you right back to the disruptors.
When am I going to start making my ADHD money like those guys? My God. Kate, I was thinking about this too. I was thinking, just so we can maybe, it seems like this kind of stuff works, we should get into some kind of podcasting fight. Like, it'll be fake, but we should start calling each other out and really go like, just we'll get pre-approved some like hurtful things that we can say about each other.
Yeah.
And really, because that
people can do TikToks about it. Right.
I do notice that. I mean, even watching the Jake Paul documentary the other night, I was like, okay, like we should start some kind of war. And that way we bring more ears to all of our podcasts. And of course, we'll be fine, but people will be like, have to tune in. But, it'll be like Howard Stern back in the day when he would wish death upon his competitors. And we really get people involved in this potential battle between us.
But the Paul brothers have something going for them with which is what the Kardashians have going for them, is that they're like a pack mentality. So it's like anything you promote, they're also going to promote too. And it's not like losers like us that are out on our own. So I think maybe we should be legally adopted and we're siblings. And then we create like a new family. Like we'll come up with a new last name.
I was like, we should start a drink brand or something like that. Like we do. I mean, we've got to start thinking.
Everybody has a drink brand. 4D we chess. We can't do an alcohol brand because like everybody has. It has to be like, it has to be something like something that's used by all people, but is little left of center. Like
we should. Can we start our own kind of, or maybe our own kind of Ozempic? We could start a personal Ozempic.
We could do that. We could do
semaglutide. Yeah.
We could do
no other podcaster is doing that. And no other podcast will be like, this is
semaglutide. Yes.
And then we'll be like, can we tell you if any housewives are taking this? No, we can't. Wink. And like, we'll infer that everybody's taking our Ozempic brand.
Isn't it surprising no celebrity has endorsed that yet? Do you think they're having conversations? Okay, here's this. I know of a couple that has like a brand of clothing like workout gear, and they told me, yeah, we were getting calls from Tori Spelling that she wanted to represent our brand. I go, if you have her represent your brand, you're out of your goddamn minds. So who are the celebrities that are calling the semaglutide companies pitching themselves as spokespeople?
That's so interesting, because I was thinking back in the day when who was that? He was a good-looking actor. He was in like Blade, but he was like the first guy to do an ad for e-cigarette. Stephen Dorff.
Dorff or something. Steven. Remember when everybody thought he was so hot? I never got that.
But he did like this first, and this was like 10 years ago. He was like, I smoke e-cigarettes. And now I was like, wow, what a pioneer for vaping.
He was a pioneer. So who's going to be the pioneer that goes, is it going to be Sharon Osbourne? I feel like she's talked about it recently. But you know what? She's not totally amped on it. You got to have somebody who's like, this has been life-changing. I've loved every single day of it. I haven't had anything to eat since,
it's got to be somebody you would be like, oh, why are they doing that? Do they need them? Like, I thought they were good with this other thing. It'd have to be somebody that you just like, Lionel Richie or somebody. Like, it's like, what? Lionel Richie? Like,
right.
He doesn't even need it, but I would just,
do you think it'll be
somebody you'd be shocked?
Will it be a male or a female celebrity that comes forward?
I think it would be great if it was a male, because that would buck the trend that it's just for females.
Interesting. Good point. It's got to be somebody.
What about a celebrity couple? Like, we're Tom and Rita Wilson for Ozempic.
I feel like the Osmonds could do it, like Marie Osmond and like and Donnie or something. I feel like Marie does.
I feel like they would beg to do it. I feel like
Marie does like every weight loss thing.
What about John Gosselin?
Bertinelli?
John Gosselin, he's back in
the
news.
John Gosselin. There you go.
John Gosselin would be like, back in the day, I put on some weight due to stress.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Yeah, because and also he's got a new girlfriend. So he
just came out with that. He just came out with that yesterday. Did you watch that Dark Side of the 2000s? That episode with the
Vice one
story? Yeah,
I did. I still have not gotten to the bottom of like what happened to Kate Gosselin and the bodyguard boyfriend. Like, were they having sex? What's happening?
that period of time when he started wearing John the Ed Hardy shirts and he was hanging on the boat with Christian Ajajaji, or however you
Oh
say his
yeah,
name, and he was dating the girl that the was it the gossip reporter
the
that also
gossip
then went
reporter
on to
who went
date Lindsay Lohan's dad.
Michael Lohan. She like went off the rails, and I think she had a baby with Michael Lohan too.
Her name was Kate something, and I believe she had
Yes.
some alcohol issues. But
Oh,
I just
she was a
remember that
disaster,
all of a
right?
sudden being a huge fan of that TLC show before I did any. I mean, this is so long ago, and then all of a sudden to break up, and I had their book Multiple Blessings. Like I was a real fan, and then all of a sudden he's on a boat smoking cigarettes and drinking vodka Red Bull with an Ed Hart. I was like,
But at
this
the
is
same time,
insane.
you're like, that makes sense because if you had been married to her, you would have done that too. And that horrible haircut, and then they lived in the dinky house. Well, I watched it because they lived in Hershey, which is where I went to boarding school.
Oh,
And I
my
was like,
parents.
why would anybody want to do a reality show in Hershey? It's like so depressing there.
That's Hershey, Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
That's where my parents went to on their honeymoon.
To the chocolate
to
hotel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also this is back. I mean, they've been married
Wait, that's
53
really
years.
what? Okay,
But also it was a cheap place. They didn't have a lot of money, like, or at
Oh
the
yeah.
time
You
it
could
was at the
go and they
time.
have the
Yeah.
spa with the chocolate. You need to tell
Yeah.
them that I went to the Milton Hershey School. They'll be like, that's so sad.
I was like, you went to, anyways. Kate Casey, you are the best. Thank you for just going everywhere with me today. I needed this conversation for my soul. The reality life with Kate Casey, there are like 4 episodes a week. I'm telling you, also sign up for that damn
6
newsletter.
Now I'm doing 6 episodes.
Sorry, guys, 6 episodes. There's a newsletter that I want you guys all to sign up for, especially that I love. I really highly recommend this newsletter. What else is coming up? Are you doing BravoCon this year? Are you doing...
Well, I asked to be a moderator, but I just don't know if they're going to ask me. I hope they do. I'd love to moderate a panel with producers. By the way, the newsletter is at katecasey.substack.com. And I'll tell you why it's also good is that you can go back and look at archive lists. So if something doesn't like set with you this week, you're like, go back to older weeks because there's something you may have missed. In fact, I have an episode this week where it's like what to watch this summer, and it goes back at some things that people may have missed. Like, by the way, did you watch Who Killed Robert Wone?
Not yet, no.
Oh my God, Ryan. You have to watch that this weekend.
You know what else I love that you
do you know what that's about?
Somebody that killed Robert Wone?
Robert Wone, here's the net. He is a married guy. He lives in Northern Virginia. He works as a general counsel for AirAsia. He stays in the city with his friends because he was working late. So he gets to their house at about 10 o'clock. It's his friends who are 2 men, they're married, and their friend who I think is like polyamorous with them. And by 11:20 or something, there's a call to 911. They're like, must have been an intruder. Our friend's in the guest room and he's been stabbed. What makes this even more strange when the responders show up, those 3 dudes are in crisp white robes, freshly showered. Their friend is upstairs with a stab wound, but there's no blood anywhere. Where?
And this is on Peacock? Is this Peacock?
Yeah, Peacock. Where's the blood? Why are they in robes?
Wait, does it answer it or is it left open?
They give you some theories so you can think about what you... Yeah, okay.
Also, you know what I responded to too was that Wham documentary on Netflix.
So good, right?
What a bright, shiny, and also very interesting to think about. Yeah, to think about George Michael, what happens afterwards. Because if you watch his documentary called what is it called? Older or something like that. It's not a companion piece, but just how dark his life got after this. And Wham was into this bright and like him finding his voice and how he could write music. And I just thought that blew me away. I love origin stories of watching somebody take something and just watch it explode. So cool. But
have you ever watched the Dolly Parton one on Netflix?
No, I love Dolly Parton too. I don't even think I knew it was on there.
Oh my God, no, you got to watch that. I cried. Okay, 2 things. I'm going to tell you 2 docs I cried about. The Dolly Parton one on Netflix. I ended up interviewing a lyricist, like a woman who wrote a book about all of her lyrics because she's fascinating, Dolly Parton. The other one, did you ever watch the Natalie Wood documentary on HBO?
Natalia Grace? Or no, Natalie Wood. I'm sorry, Wood. Yes, I did watch that. I did watch Natalie Wood and her oh my God. Did you know Christopher Walken was on the boat the night she died?
I sure did. I know the whole thing. I think it was an accident. I think they were just, I think
really,
she was drunk.
I don't know. There's something about Robert Wagner that I sometimes don't like. I'm like, it just seems.
Well, then do you remember the documentary? The daughter interviewed him at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
I cried hard in that one because of what the life that she could have lived. Like, I think she would have run a studio. How about in it? Robert Redford's like, she's the reason I have a career. Like, she totally fought for me. She was such a great person for other actors, like really helped other people. And I feel like also in that doc, when they found her daughter found that letter that she had submitted to a magazine, but then scrapped it, where she basically says she was sexually assaulted on set.
Yeah, I went and saw where she's buried in Westwood. Have you ever
You
been
did?
that
No,
celebrity?
tell me.
Oh my God. There's this in Westwood. You would not believe it because there's all these big buildings. And then all of a sudden in between these buildings, there's like this most beautiful, peaceful cemetery, but it's Hugh Hefner's buried there, Marilyn Monroe, Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. They're buried right next to, but they're buried right next to each other.
They're buried next to each other?
They're buried
I
next
didn't know
to
that.
Hugh Hefner is buried on top of Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, that's
Like
gross. Are you kidding me?
no, that is.
He arranged that?
Well, I think that I don't know the actual history, but look that up. But that is in the
He's
same
a piece of shit.
mausoleum.
I can't stand that. I'm so pissed off about that now. But I like that Jack Lemmon.
You should go
Walter Matthau.
walk around this because it is one of the coolest, most peaceful, and people, obviously pay top dollar. But some of the biggest celebrities are all here. The Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau thing, I love. So I love both of them so much. But now that other thing, like, I wonder if one day they'll have like a reality show burial ground.
I swear to God, this is the last thing. I'm so the worst. Have you recently, in the last decade, gone back and watched Bad News Bears with Walter Matthau?
I have not. I watched. No, I have not.
Funny because it is not appropriate. Like that show does not. The movie does not hold up. First of all, he shows up to the baseball practice and he's an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Like that would never. And then Kelly shows up on a motorcycle smoking a cigarette. Like no movie would be greenlit like now with that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird how like we've gone backwards and we've gone forwards in some ways, but it is interesting. I don't know. So you guys,
or even like Hoosiers, the coach is like an alcoholic
Hoosiers.
too.
Gene Hackman. I mean, that's alcoholics. They make great movies. They don't make great in real life if you know them, but movies.
But I'm saying they're like erasing that story from movies, like because it's like, oh well, that like that's too sad. It's like, well, that's reality though.
But like you said, everything's circular, so it'll probably come back around at some point if we study pop culture like we do. Reality Life with Kate Casey, 30 episodes a week. Go subscribe to the newsletter. Hopefully we'll see her at BravoCon.
And Facebook group too. Join the
Facebook group.
Yeah,
Reality Life with Kate Casey Facebook group. She's brilliant. So thank you, Kate. I really appreciate it.
I love you so much.
Love you too.